Dr. Amara Nwosu stepped off the red-eye flight just before dawn, her eyes heavy but her mind sharp. The Atlanta air was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin like a second layer. She'd been in Lagos for a board meeting, then Paris for a design review, and now she was back on home soil, exhausted, yes, but wired with the kind of quiet focus that came from years of building something from nothing. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Not her assistant, not the hotel manager, not even her COO. This was a surprise visit, one of her favorite ways to see how things really ran when no one was watching. Her newest property, the Sable Grand, had opened just 3 months ago. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of her hospitality group. Sleek marble floors, curated art from Black artists across the diaspora, a rooftop bar with skyline views that made guests gasp. But Amara knew better than anyone that luxury means nothing if the people inside don't feel seen. She wore a faded hoodie, ripped jeans and sneakers, clothes she'd grabbed from the back of her suitcase without thinking. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. To anyone glancing, she looked like a tired traveler, maybe a grad student catching a few hours before class. Not the woman who'd signed the lease, approved the budget, and named the hotel after her grandmother's favorite shade of indigo. The lobby of the Sable Grand shimmered under soft golden lights. Plush velvet chairs, the scent of sandalwood and citrus in the air, a jazz trio playing softly near the bar. It was exactly as she'd envisioned, except for the energy. There was a stiffness in the air, a kind of guarded polish that felt more like performance than warmth. She walked up to the front desk, where a young man in a crisp navy blazer stood typing on a tablet. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, his eyes flicked over her, once quickly, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Help you?" he asked, voice flat. "I'd like a room," Amara said, keeping her tone neutral. He glanced at his screen, then back at her. "We're fully booked." "Really?" "It's 5 a.m., corporate event. Entire floors reserved." She nodded slowly. "I understand. But I'm happy to pay walk-in rate. Any room will do." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice like he was doing her a favor. "Look, I don't know what you've heard, but we don't do last-minute stays unless you've got a reservation or a corporate card. Policy." Amara didn't flinch. "What if I told you I own this hotel?" For the first time he laughed, short, sharp, dismissive. "Right, and I'm the King of England." She held his gaze. "My name is Amara Nwosu," he blinked, then smirked. "Never heard of you." A beat of silence passed. Around them the lobby hummed. Elevator dings, distant laughter from the bar, the soft clink of ice in a glass. But Amara felt like she was standing in a vacuum. She'd been underestimated before, plenty of times, but rarely this brazenly, and never in a place she'd built with her own hands. "Can I speak to your manager?" she asked calmly. "You're talking to him," he said, puffing his chest just slightly. "And I've got a hotel to run. So unless you've got a booking number or a credit card with a 5-figure limit, I suggest you try the motel down the street." The words landed like a slap, not because they were loud, but because they were casual, spoken with the ease of someone who'd said them before, to people who couldn't fight back. Amara didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned and walked out, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. Outside, the city was just waking up. Delivery trucks rumbled down the street. A street sweeper hissed past, and the first streaks of pink light cut through the skyline. She stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, breathing in the cool morning air, letting the sting settle into something sharper, clarity. Through the glass doors, she saw the young man, Tyler, according to his name tag, turn to a colleague and say something with a grin. The other staff member laughed. Amara didn't need to hear the words to know what they were saying. She pulled out her phone, dialed a number she knew by heart. "It's me," she said when the line picked up. "Cancel my 9 a.m. in New York. I'm staying in Atlanta." A pause. "Everything okay?" "No," she said quietly. "But it will be." She hung up and watched as Tyler straightened his blazer, running a hand through his hair like he'd just won something. He had no idea he'd just lost everything. Amara walked to a nearby coffee shop, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window with her laptop. She pulled up the Sable Grand's internal dashboard. Guest logs, staff schedules, customer complaints. Within minutes, she found what she expected, a pattern. Over the past 6 weeks, at least a dozen walk-in guests, mostly black, mostly dressed casually, had been turned away with vague excuses. Some had left one-star reviews mentioning unwelcoming staff or feeling judged at check-in. Those complaints had been marked resolved by management, but never escalated. She scrolled through staff training records. Tyler had skipped 2 mandatory diversity sessions. His hiring notes praised his polished demeanor and understanding of luxury clientele. No mention of empathy. No mention of service. Her phone buzzed. A text from her COO, "You want me to fly down?" Amara typed back, "Yes, bring legal. And HR. We're doing an emergency leadership review at the Sable Grand, effective immediately." She sipped her coffee, her eyes never leaving the hotel across the street. This wasn't just about one rude manager. It was about the culture he'd been allowed to create, the kind of culture that made people like her feel like outsiders in their own spaces. She thought about her grandmother, who'd worked as a maid in hotels like this one, scrubbing floors for tips and never once being allowed to use the guest elevator. Amara had built the Sable Grand to be different, to be a place where someone like her grandmother would be treated like royalty. And yet, here she was, denied a room in her own hotel because she didn't look the part. But that was the thing about looking the part. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones you never see coming. Amara closed her laptop. She didn't feel angry anymore. She felt focused, determined, ready. Because tomorrow she wouldn't be walking in as a tired traveler in a hoodie. She'd be walking in as the owner. And this time, they'd know exactly who she was. The next morning, Amara walked into the Sable Grand like she owned the place because she did. No hoodie this time. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, her hair neatly twisted, heels clicking with quiet authority on the marble floor. Behind her walked 2 people, her head of legal, calm and unreadable in a navy blazer, and her COO, sharp-eyed and already scanning the lobby like a hawk. The moment they stepped inside, the air changed. The front desk staff froze. A bellhop dropped a luggage tag. Even the jazz music from the bar seemed to pause. Tyler stood near the concierge desk, adjusting a vase of orchids. When he saw her, his face went slack. He tried to smile, but it came out crooked, nervous. "Dr. Nwosu," he stammered, rushing over. I had no idea it was you last night." "If I'd known, you'd what?" Amara asked, her voice even calm. "Treated me differently? Because I'm the CEO? Or because I finally looked like someone you thought deserved a room?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "I'm here for an operational review," she said, loud enough for nearby staff to hear. "Effective immediately. All department heads report to the Sapphire Room in 30 minutes. You're included, Tyler." She didn't wait for a response. She moved through the lobby like she was walking through her own living room. Familiar, in control. She nodded at the housekeeping cart in the hallway, paused to admire a new painting in the corridor, even complimented the scent of the hand soap in the restroom. Every detail mattered. Every person mattered. In the Sapphire Room, a private meeting space named after her mother, Amara sat at the head of the table while department leads trickled in. Front desk, housekeeping, food and beverage, security. Some looked confused. Others looked scared. Tyler hovered near the door, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Amara began. "Last night I visited this hotel as a guest. I was denied a room. Not because we were full. Our occupancy last night was 68%. Not because I couldn't pay. I have more than enough credit with this company. I was denied because I didn't look like what someone here thinks a valued guest should look like." Silence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. So today we're going to find out how that happened. And more importantly, how deep it goes. Over the next few hours, Amara led a quiet but thorough investigation. She reviewed guest logs from the past 2 months, cross-referencing them with reservation notes and staff comments. She pulled up security footage, not just from last night but from other evenings. She saw it again and again. Guests in casual clothes, especially black and brown travelers, being questioned more aggressively, asked for extra ID, or flat out told there were no rooms, even when the system showed availability. Then she started talking to people. Not as the CEO, but as someone who genuinely wanted to listen. She found May in the linen closet on the 3rd floor, folding towels with hands rough from years of work. May was in her late 50s with kind eyes and a voice so soft you had to lean in to hear her. "Can I ask you something?" Amara said, sitting on a stack of clean sheets. May nodded, wary but not afraid. Have you noticed anything off with how guests are treated here? May hesitated. Then quietly, some folks don't get the same welcome, ma'am, especially if they don't dress fancy. Tyler, he says things, like we're not a shelter or this ain't a bus station. He don't say it loud, but he says it. Amara's stomach tightened. Has he ever said that about me? May looked down. Last night, he told the night crew you were trying to scam a free stay. Said you looked like you just came off the street. Amara didn't react outwardly, but inside, something hardened. Thank you for telling me, she spoke with the concierge, who admitted Tyler had once turned away a family of 4 because their rental car didn't match the vibe. She talked to a dishwasher in the kitchen who said he'd seen Tyler mock a guest's worn suitcase behind the service desk. By mid-afternoon, the pattern was undeniable. Tyler hadn't just made one bad call. He'd built a little kingdom of exclusion, and he'd done it under the hotel's name. Back in the Sapphire room, Amara called Tyler in alone. He walked in like he was bracing for a storm. I've already apologized, he said quickly. I'll retrain. I'll do whatever it takes. Sit down, she said. He did. Do you know why I started this company? She asked. He shook his head. Because when I was 22, I applied for a front desk job at a luxury hotel in Chicago. I had the degree, the experience, the references, but the manager told me, we're looking for someone who fits the guest profile. I didn't look like the guests, so I wasn't welcome, even as staff. Tyler stared at his hands. This hotel, Amara continued, was built to be different. To say you belong here no matter what you wear, where you're from, or what your bank account says. And you, someone I trusted to uphold that, decided to gatekeep it like it was your personal clubhouse. I didn't mean, he started. But you did. She cut in gently. Actions matter more than intentions. She stood up. You're suspended, effective immediately. HR will contact you about next steps. But before you go, I need you to do something. He looked up, confused. I want you to sit in that lobby tonight. Not as staff. As a guest, just sit. Watch who comes in. Watch how they're treated. And ask yourself, who gets to feel welcome here? And who decides? Tyler left without another word. Later that evening, Amara sat alone in the rooftop bar, the city lights glittering below. Her legal team had drafted the termination paperwork. Her COO was already lining up an interim manager, but Amara wasn't thinking about logistics. She was thinking about May, about the family turned away, about every person who'd walked through those doors hoping for a little dignity and gotten suspicion instead. She pulled out her phone and texted her PR lead. Start drafting a public statement. We're not hiding this. We're fixing it. Then she looked out at the skyline and whispered almost to herself, you have no idea what you just cost yourself. But more than that, she knew exactly what she was about to build in its place. The grand ballroom of the Sable Grand had never felt so quiet. Normally it buzzed with cocktail parties, weddings, or corporate galas, music, laughter, the clink of champagne flutes. But this morning, over 100 employees stood in neat rows, some in crisp uniforms, others in street clothes, all waiting. Nervous energy hung in the air like static. Amara stood at the front, no podium, no notes. Just her, a microphone, and the weight of what came next. Thank you for being here, she began, her voice steady but warm. Most of you didn't sign up for drama. You signed up to make guests feel cared for, to keep this place running with pride. And I know many of you do that every single day, quietly, faithfully, without fanfare. She paused, letting that sink in. But something happened here that goes against everything we stand for. And when that happens, we don't sweep it under the rug. We face it, together. She turned slightly and nodded toward the side door. Tyler walked in, shoulders hunched, eyes down. A few people gasped. Others exchanged glances. He looked like he hadn't slept. Tyler, Amara said gently, would you come up here? He shuffled forward, stopping a few feet from her. The room held its breath. I want you to tell everyone what happened 2 nights ago, she said. In your own words. He swallowed hard. I was working the front desk. A woman came in, asked for a room. We were busy. I thought she was trying to get a free stay. I told her we were full. I didn't believe her when she said she owned the hotel. And why didn't you believe her? Amara asked. He hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, because she didn't look like someone who could own a place like this. The words landed like stones. No one moved. Amara didn't scold him. She didn't shame him publicly beyond what was necessary. Instead, she turned to the room. That moment right there is why we're here. Not to punish one person, but to ask, how did we let this mindset take root? She explained the audit findings, how guests had been turned away based on appearance, how training had been ignored, how a culture of exclusion had quietly grown in the shadows of luxury. Then she dropped the other shoe. Tyler is suspended pending termination, she said, not just because of one mistake, but because leadership failed to correct a pattern. And that stops now. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others wiped their eyes. But this isn't just about him, she continued. It's about us. Every single one of us has the power to make someone feel seen or small. And from today on, we choose seen. She announced immediate changes. Mandatory anti-bias training led by an outside firm, anonymous guest feedback tied to team bonuses, and a new guest-first pledge every employee would sign. Then she did something unexpected. She walked over to May, who stood near the back in her housekeeping uniform, and took her hand. May has worked in hospitality for 23 years. She knows more about real service than most managers ever will. Starting today, she's interim front desk supervisor. The room erupted, not in cheers, but in something deeper: relief, respect, hope. May's eyes filled with tears. She didn't say a word, just squeezed Amara's hand. After the meeting, Amara stayed. She walked through the halls, answering questions, listening to concerns. A young dishwasher asked if he could suggest a local artist for the staff lounge wall. A concierge asked about childcare support during night shifts. She took notes on her phone, promised follow-ups. By late afternoon, the story had leaked. A guest who'd been checking in during the incident posted a short video online. Y'all won't believe this. They denied the CEO of the hotel because she's black and dressed like a normal person. The clip showed Amara walking out, then returning the next day in her suit. It spread fast, news outlets called. Bloggers wrote think pieces. Hashtags trended. Know your guest from Sable Grand Truth. Amara gave one interview to a local Atlanta station, no national networks. She kept it simple. This isn't about me, she said, sitting in the hotel's garden courtyard, sunlight filtering through magnolia trees. It's about the thousands of people who walk into places like this every day and wonder, do I belong here? The answer should always be yes. Not because of what they wear or how they look, but because they're human. She didn't attack Tyler, she didn't call for outrage. She focused on solutions, on healing, on building something better. That evening, as she reviewed the day's notes in her temporary office, her phone buzzed. A text from an old mentor. You handled that with grace and steel. Rare combo. She smiled faintly. Then another notification popped up. A call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Dr. Nwosu, a shaky voice said. It's Tyler, she exhaled slowly. I'm listening. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the cameras, not for my job, for real. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. Amara was quiet for a long moment. Seeing it is step one, she said finally. Doing the work is step two. And that work? It doesn't happen here. Not anymore. You've got to go do it somewhere else. Humbly, consistently, without expecting praise. I will, he said, voice cracking. I swear. I hope you do, she replied. Because the world needs people who learn, not just people who lead. She hung up and stared out the window. The hotel lights were coming on, soft and golden. Inside, staff were resetting the dining room, laughing over spilled salt, helping each other with name tags. It felt alive again. Real. Later, she walked down to the front desk. May was there, helping a young couple check in. They looked tired, maybe nervous. The woman kept smoothing her dress like she was worried it wasn't fancy enough. May smiled warmly. Welcome to the Sable Grand. We've been expecting you. Amara lingered in the shadows, watching. The couple relaxed instantly. The man even chuckled at something May said. That's when Amara knew. The real repair had already begun, not with headlines, not with firings, but with moments like this, one guest, one smile, one act of true welcome at a time, and she'd make sure it never stopped. Amara didn't leave Atlanta after the staff meeting. Instead, she checked into room 312, a standard king room on the third floor, the kind regular guests stayed in. not the penthouse suite reserved for VIPs. She wanted to see the hotel through their eyes, feel what they felt, notice what they noticed. She unpacked a small suitcase, hung her clothes in the closet, and placed her favorite book on the nightstand. No special requests, no upgrades, just a guest like any other. That first morning, she ate breakfast in the main dining room. She sat alone at a corner table, watching how the servers moved, some warm and attentive, others stiff, still shaken by the week's events. She ordered oatmeal and coffee, the same as the couple at the next table, who whispered to each other like they were afraid of being overheard. After breakfast, she wandered the halls, stopping to talk with anyone who'd speak with her. She asked the laundry attendant how the new detergent smelled, chatted with the valet about traffic downtown, and spent 20 minutes with the night auditor, who admitted he'd been too scared to speak up about Tyler's behavior before. "I didn't want to cause trouble," he said. Eyes downcast. "You wouldn't have been causing trouble," Amara replied gently. "You'd have been protecting our values." By day 3, something shifted. Staff started approaching her, not with fear but with ideas. The bartender suggested hosting local poets on slow weeknights. The front desk team proposed a welcome note in every room, handwritten in different languages based on the guest's origin. May brought her a list of community groups that had stopped booking events here after feeling unwelcome. That's when Amara knew what she had to do next. She called a meeting, not with executives, but with neighbors. She invited Black business owners, pastors, nonprofit leaders, and longtime residents from the surrounding blocks. She rented out the hotel's garden terrace, served sweet tea and peach cobbler, and simply listened. One woman, who ran a youth mentorship program, said, "We used to bring our kids here for graduation dinners. Stopped 2 years ago, felt like we were being watched, like we didn't belong." Another man, who owned a barbershop down the street, added, "Luxury shouldn't mean exclusion, but too often it does." Amara took notes, asked questions, didn't defend, didn't explain, just absorbed. 2 days later, she stood in the same garden and announced a new initiative, the Sable Welcome Pledge. It had 3 parts. First, the hotel would offer free stays once a month to local first responders, EMTs, firefighters, community health workers, who often worked double shifts and rarely got a real night's rest. Second, they'd partner with nearby HBCUs, offering paid internships in hospitality management, plus scholarships for students pursuing careers in service industries. Third, and most personal, Amara launched the Grandma's Room program. Once a quarter, elders from the neighborhood would be invited for a full spa day, dinner, and overnight stay, all on the house. Because, she said during the announcement, the people who built this city deserve to rest in its finest spaces. The response was immediate. Local news covered it. Community leaders posted about it. Even former guests who'd left bad reviews reached out to say they'd give the Sable Grant another chance. Behind the scenes, Amara worked with HR and an outside DEI firm to rebuild the hiring process from the ground up. No more vague terms like "fits the brand." Instead, every candidate would be evaluated on empathy, problem-solving, and cultural humility. Guest feedback, especially from marginalized communities, would directly impact manager bonuses. She also made one quiet but powerful change. All leadership meetings now began with a guest story, a real note from a recent visitor, good or bad. No data slides, just human moments. Meanwhile, Tyler reached out again. This time, he didn't ask for his job back. He asked if he could attend one of the anti-bias training sessions, not as staff but as a paying participant. Amara said no, not out of spite, but because the program was for current employees only. But she did send him a list of public workshops in the city along with a note: "Growth is possible. But it starts with humility, not convenience." He never replied. But a month later, she heard through a mutual contact that he'd enrolled in a certificate program on inclusive leadership at a local community college. She wasn't sure if it was genuine change or just damage control, but she hoped, for his sake and for others, it was real. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Amara sat on the rooftop with May. The city hummed below, lights flickering on one by one. "You ever think you'd be running the front desk here?" Amara asked. May laughed softly. "Not in my wildest dreams. But I always knew how to treat people right. My mama taught me that before I could tie my shoes." Amara smiled. That's the kind of leadership we need. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then May said, "You know, before all this, I used to tell my grandkids to avoid places like this. Said they weren't for folks like us. And now?" Amara asked. "Now I tell them to walk in like they own the place," May said, eyes shining. "Because people like you made sure they do." Amara looked out at the horizon, her heart full but her mind already moving forward. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something deeper. A model that could spread to every hotel in her group, maybe even beyond. Because real luxury wasn't in the thread count or the marble floors. It was in the feeling you got when you walked through the door and someone looked you in the eye and said, "Without words, you're safe here. You matter here," and that was worth rebuilding everything for. 6 months after that quiet morning when she'd been turned away from her own hotel, Amara stood in the same lobby. But everything felt different. The air was lighter. The smiles from staff weren't practiced. They were real. Guests lingered in the seating areas, chatting like they belonged. Because now they did. The Sable Grand wasn't just thriving, it was becoming a blueprint. Guest satisfaction scores had climbed to the highest in the company's history. Employee turnover dropped by half, and the Welcome Pledge had already hosted dozens of first responders, elders, and students, each leaving with stories they told their neighbors, their churches, their classrooms. But Amara wasn't resting. She'd spent the last few weeks finalizing something bigger, a free open-access certification program called Equitable Hospitality. Any hotel anywhere could enroll. The curriculum covered unconscious bias, inclusive design, community engagement, and how to hire for heart, not just polish. She'd partnered with civil rights organizations and hospitality schools to make sure it was practical, not performative. The launch event was held in the Grand Ballroom, the same room where she'd confronted Tyler months earlier. This time it was filled with hotel managers from across the country, nonprofit leaders, and even a few former critics who'd come to see if the change was real. Amara didn't give a flashy speech. She told stories. She talked about the single mom from Memphis who cried when the front desk handed her daughter a welcome note in Spanish, just because they noticed her name on the reservation. She shared how a veteran used to being ignored broke down when offered a free stay after working 3 nights straight at the hospital. She described the elderly couple from Savannah who'd never stayed in a luxury hotel before, but left saying, "We finally felt like we mattered." Then she said something that stuck with everyone. Hospitality isn't about how much you charge. It's about how much you care. And caring isn't a policy. It's a practice. After the event, she was invited to speak at the National Hospitality Leadership Conference in Chicago. The organizers expected a talk about branding or revenue growth. Instead, Amara walked on stage in a simple navy dress and began with a memory. She was 19, working her first job at a downtown hotel, cleaning rooms during summer break. One afternoon, she'd been sent to restock towels in the executive lounge. A guest saw her and immediately called security, accusing her of stealing. She wasn't allowed to explain, just escorted out through the service entrance, humiliated while guests watched in silence. "I carried that shame for years," she said, voice steady. "Not because I did anything wrong, but because the system told me I didn't belong in beautiful spaces, unless I was serving someone else." She paused, looked out at the sea of industry leaders. "But here's what I learned. We don't have to accept that system. We can build new ones. Ones where dignity isn't earned, it's given, automatically, freely, to everyone." The room was silent for a full 10 seconds before the applause began. Not polite clapping, but a rising wave of recognition. Some people stood. Others wiped their eyes. Back in Atlanta, life at the Sable Grand settled into a new rhythm. May, now the official front desk manager, had trained a whole new team using the Guest First pledge. She made sure every new hire spent a day shadowing housekeeping and kitchen staff, so they remember who really keeps this place running, she'd say. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, an elderly black couple arrived holding hands, suitcases slightly worn at the edges. They looked around nervously, like they weren't sure they were in the right place. May greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Sable Grand, we've been expecting you." The woman blinked. "You have?" May nodded. "Dr. Nwosu made sure this place would always feel like yours." The man's shoulders relaxed. The woman squeezed his hand. And just like that, the invisible wall that so many had felt for so long began to dissolve, one guest at a time. Amara watched the exchange from the mezzanine, hidden behind a potted fern. She didn't need to be seen. She just needed to know it was working. Later that week, she received a letter from a young woman in Detroit. She'd stayed at the Sable Grand during a college tour and said it was the first time she'd ever felt truly welcome in a fancy place. She ended the letter with, "You made me believe I could belong anywhere." Amara pinned that letter to her office wall, right next to a photo of her grandmother in her maid's uniform. She thought often about that night 6 months ago. The hoodie, the denial, the walk back out into the cold. It had hurt, but it had also clarified everything. Sometimes the deepest wounds reveal the truest paths forward. Now her company was rolling out the Equitable Hospitality certification to all its properties. Other hotel groups had started calling, asking how they could join. Even competitors were taking notes, but Amara wasn't chasing scale. She was chasing impact, because she knew that real change didn't happen in boardrooms alone. It happened in lobbies, at front desks, in the quiet moments when someone looked you in the eye and said, without saying a word, "You're safe here." Some leaders build empires. Others rebuild them with justice as the foundation. And Amara? She was just getting started.